My 25 male, wife, 27 female, and I recently had and things aren't going well. So there's a lot to unpack here, so please excuse the length. Before I begin, I'd want to make a list of the topics on which I'd like to get advice so that you can keep it in mind as you read. Thank you for reading this and providing me with your unbiased feedback. Am I being too self-centered? Am I being unjust? Is it possible that I'm absolutely wrong? What can I do to improve her understanding of me? My wife and I had been dating for 9 years and married last month. We discussed the potential of a back in August. She said that she wanted to experience it with a female. Then I said that I believe it would be fun to do it with a man for her, not me. Let's go back to our wedding night. By the end, we were both pretty intoxicated and had somehow invited one of my friends to the hotel. We carried out the action, despite the fact that we were all too inebriated to understand much of it. So we decided to go again the next weekend, this time a little less inebriated. It was fantastic all around. We had a terrific time together. So we decided to give it another go the following weekend. This is when everything began to go bad. Following this session, I realized she was much more excited by him than I was, but I understand it. Apart from me, this is her only other experience. That is not the reason I'm upset/hurt. What disturbed me was that I had inquired about her favorite portion. She said that it was giving her head without my intervention. That upset me since she's previously said that she doesn't like giving head all that much. So to me, it simply implies she dislikes giving me head. I also instructed her to go collect my buddy from the living room later that night. He couldn't get it up, so I told her she had to bring him back by whatever means necessary, so we could continue with the night. However, no one returned after 8 minutes. When I came out, she was giving him the head on the sofa. I didn't mind at the moment and simply went with it. Later, I learned that they had both forgotten about me and had gone on with their lives. I decided to tell her how I felt, and she admitted that she had been making mistakes. I informed her that I'd been having a good time through it all, but I wanted confirmation from her outside of that I was still her first priority. I attempted to initiate things with her over the week after that point, but she kept insisting she wasn't in the mood. We didn't get out with my buddy the next weekend, but the two of us did it eventually. The next week was her period, so nothing was going to happen, which I'm okay with. That weekend, though, we went to an event with our friends, and one of the three of us attended. We decided to give it a shot the next morning, but my wife said she didn't want to do anything. She did, however, say she wouldn't mind giving us her head. The next week, we attended another function together. That night, it was still within her week. She repeated the same thing, but he left before anything occurred. What made me think was that she always said she didn't want to give me head when she was on her period since she couldn't receive anything in return. However, she offered it to both of us twice in a week. We did it again this past weekend, and everyone had a terrific time. However, I can't get the thought out of my brain that she doesn't enjoy giving head that much, particularly during her week, but what she does when he's present is completely different. We've only been married for 6 weeks. We've done it 5 times and once as a solo. In my opinion, we should have done it more often throughout the week/weekend than only once in 6 weeks. I've mentioned it to her a couple times lately. I've tried to keep it in at times, but she can sense there's something wrong with me, so she pressures me. When I originally informed her, she replied she understood what I was saying. Nothing changed after a few weeks, so I brought it up again, and she became enraged, saying why I continue bringing it up after claiming I'm over it. She felt horrible and wanted to attempt to repair our friendship. She took me out on a date, and it was on that night that we finally had for the first time as a couple, week 4 of our marriage. Today, though, I messed up. This morning, I began to consider the entire head problem. She took me out on another date night, and after a few drinks, I simply blurted out everything I was feeling. She was enraged at me for spoiling her date night. I admit that I made a mistake. I should have informed her sooner, or at least after date night. But we were talking about the entire issue, and I just began expressing something that avalanched into all my ideas and emotions. She's irritated because I keep bringing it up. She stated it's my responsibility since I'm the one who starts so I shouldn't be furious at her. I attempted to explain to her that it wasn't that bothered me. It was my wife's dissatisfaction with the lack of care I was showing her as a spouse. It was too late by then, and we were too angry. I'm at a loss on what to do right now. That is why I am penning this message. And before anybody says anything, I know she loves and cares for me from the bottom of her heart. This is merely a new experience for her, and she's too engrossed in it. My assumption is that she just does not comprehend my emotions. That's what I'm looking for guidance on. I'm sure I left out some specifics, but this is all I can think of and bear right now. Thank you for sticking with me this far. Hopefully, something positive will come out of this. Story 2. My wife confesses to having an affair. My wife admitted to having an affair that lasted about 3 years over 20 years ago. She was in her late 30s. It was a true gut hit that left me in shambles. I was a disaster. I left her and my kid and moved in with our bachelor buddy for 4 months. We talked divorce. My wife said that she does not want a divorce. I opted to remain since I had 2 boys in high school. I didn't want to be a stay-at-home dad. My wife and I both come from religious homes. This was unexpected for my wife, which is why it came as such a surprise to me. We continue to attend church on a regular basis and are active participants in church activities. However, we now attend separate churches. It got to the point that my thoughts about her affair were interfering with my focus, particularly at work. I ultimately accepted that I had no control over what my wife did. My thinking gradually began to shift. I informed my wife that if she wanted to have with another man, I was okay with it. She said that she would not do so. It took me nearly a year to shift my thinking. Fast forward a few years, and our boys have both graduated from college with advanced degrees and are quite successful. This is something that may not have occurred if we had divorced. Our life, on the other hand, is non-existent. We get along most of the time, but things aren't the same. I doubt they ever will be after an affair. A year after her affair, I was in Lowe's and spotted a close friend of the coworker with whom my wife had the affair. I inquired whether the coworker had ever confided in him about my wife. He didn't want to tell me anything at first. I eventually got him to open up and speak to me. I recall what he said to me clearly. He said a coworker informed him that my wife truly knew how to turn it on in bed. She knows how to bring it. That my wife had the nicest piece of he'd ever had. That she had the of a high school kid, lovely and tight, and that he became to her. His acquaintance went on to tell me that the man with whom she had an affair was known to have a massive cock. I began thinking about my wife's coworker and her relationships with other men. In the lack of, it has become my getaway. That is not typical, I know. Although my wife admitted to me that she was having an affair, she never told me anything about it or when it began until a couple of years ago. I decided to start writing down what she was saying. In a sense, it was therapy for me, and I must confess, I was getting a charge out of what she was saying. I used my phone's recorder to record anything she says to me. It took months and was very time-intensive. I'd look through everything I've written again and ask my wife additional questions. She is not always receptive. Nevertheless, the more she saw that I did not respond badly to what she was telling me, the more she opened up. I normally avoid quizzing her on days when she is drinking wine, which is about every day. Her lips get looser as she finishes her final glass of wine. I attempt to get as much information as possible from her. I attempt to get her to tell me how things got to that point, what she was thinking and experiencing at the time she told me something. To make my fantasies a reality, I attempted to get her engaged with a few of our bachelor friends, but she refused. My next victim was Alex, our termite inspector, whom we'd known for years. Alex's wife died of cancer. My wife and I paid our respects during her funeral. It took some time for Alex to recover from it. He'd tell us how much he missed her and how he'd never be in a relationship with another lady. My wife expressed sympathy for Alex and expressed a great deal of empathy for him. To cut a long tale short, I was successful. With Alex in the picture, she began to reveal more and more about her history. I had a feeling there was something going on between her, her employer, and another person, other than her co-worker with which she had the affair. Back then, she'd tell me a few things about these other individuals in an attempt to assuage my doubts. I'm starting to see that there was more to her previous tales. If my mentality had not changed, I would have never known about her, her employer, and the other person. She also began to tell me about her experiences at conferences. I had no reason to suspect anything with her and her conference companions. What a wake-up call for me. Actually, listening to her gives me a charge. My wife has kept her exploits under wraps, and only a few individuals are aware of them. Even our old bachelor buddy, who worked in the same division as my wife, had no idea about her affair.